What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the Transformers Legacy United, Doom and Destruction, Decepticon Bludgeon and Ruckus, which is easily shaping up to be by far one of the best looking out of all of the Amazon exclusive 2-packs. So here we have Bludgeon, who is directly inspired by how he originally appeared in the IDW comics, and when it does come down to a design, this guy is looking killer. So as we check out the details, the head sculpt is simply fantastic, and I think it's easily the biggest selling point about this version. The cybernetics and the wiring which are integrated into this guy's mouthpiece are looking sick. The chest unit is also a huge improvement in comparison to the original, as this too has also been completely redesigned, and the same can also be said as we spin down here to the skirt armor. This has been slightly modified so that yet again it does better match that of the original design. Now when it does come down to the rest of the robot mode, this is pretty much just a recolor of the Legacy Tarn, but to be honest guys, I really can't say that is a bad thing, because when it does come down to a robot mode, this has to be by far one of the best looking Voyagers that Hasbro have released in a very long time. Not only has he been detailed front side to back, but he has also been completely filled in, and there is also barely any excess tank kibble. This is an incredibly clean looking Decepticon. So in all, it really is just a killer take on the Bludgeon design, and to be quite honest guys, I really do think that this is the exact version which we really should have seen when it came around to the Legacy Evolution mainline. Which, speaking of, we also see the return of the Evo Fusion gimmick, because when it does come down to weaponry, Bludgeon includes an inbuilt arm cannon which could most definitely rival that of Megatron's. This can also be split into two individual weapons, or even combined to create an absolute beast. When it does come down to the battlefield, Bludgeon should have no issues in raining hell down upon the Autobots. But that ain't it for this Decepticon Samurai, as we also see the return of his pretty savage looking katana, which in addition to being sculpted front side to back, has also been pretty decently painted. And for whatever reason, if any of those fail him, then Bludgeon has one final trick up his sleeve, as the turrets, which are a part of his backpack design, can be removed and transformed into two batons, so this guy should have no issues in bludgeoning his opponents to death. Now, turning to this guy's articulation, this figure was made to pose. So to begin with, the head can look up, it can then look down, it can also be spun both left to right. The shoulders can then kick forwards, they can then kick backwards, they can also kick here out to the side. The bicep can spin, the elbow can bend, the wrist can then rotate, and this guy has totally joined the open hand gang, which then reveals some pretty decent palm detail. The waist can spin both side to side, and the hips are absolutely packing, because in addition to kicking forwards to that far, one part of the design that I've always been a huge fan of is how the skirt armor is actually inbuilt into the hip joint, meaning that it does move simultaneously along with it. The thigh can then spin, the knee can bend way past 90, and can also go even further if you disengage the transformation joint. So when it does come down to this guy kicking himself up the backside, he should have no issues in doing so. And then finally, the true icing on the cake would be the ankle articulation. These can rock inwards and outwards, as well as can also rock downwards, allowing you to get this guy into some pretty nutty poses. Blasting his way onto the Cybertronian battlefield, here we have Ruckus, who appears to be incredibly inspired by his original G1 counterpart. So as we check out the details and the overall design, when it does come down to the entire upper torso, this appears to be near bang on in comparison to that original 80s toy. But as we spin down here to the legs, these are by far the biggest upgrade in comparison to the original Legacy Beachcomber, which this guy is surprisingly an extensive redo of. These have pretty much been completely redesigned from the ground upwards, and are packing a pretty decent size. In comparison to the rest of the Legacy Deluxes, this guy may just be one of the largest, which honestly I do think is kind of surprising, considering that with the exception of the forearms, he has also been mostly filled in front side to back, which speaking of, he is also packing an incredibly clean profile, which yet again is a pretty neat throwback to that OG G1 toy. So overall, this is definitely a brilliant companion piece to stack up alongside the Legacy Bludgeon, and may just end up being the biggest selling point of the entire 2-pack. Not only for fans of the original G1 toy, but for those who are also planning to finish off their Triggercon collection. Which, talking of, what would a Triggercon be without a ton of additional weapons? So up first we do see the return of the Bull Bar, which can totally double as a minigun. Also included, again as a great throwback to the original G1 toy, would be these two pretty sweet Cybertronian blasters, which in addition to being used as a pair of sick handheld weapons, can also be fully integrated into this guy's design to create some pretty banging over the shoulder cannons, which again is a great throwback to the gimmick of the original G1 toy. Checking out what ruckus this guy can cause, despite appearing to be incredibly 80s inspired, he is most definitely packing when it does come down to articulation. So to begin with, the head can look up slightly, it can then of course spin side to side, the shoulders can kick forwards, they can kick backwards, they can then kick outwards, spin around here at the bicep, bend at the elbow, the wrist can rotate, although you are most definitely going to want to bring in the accessory to do so, as that joint is incredibly tight. One major improvement in comparison to most of the figures released during the 80s would be this guy's packing a completely unhindered waist joint. The hips can then kick forwards, they can also kick backwards, they can then kick out to the side, spin around here at the thigh, bend pretty much there to 90 at the knee, and I do believe originally there were some collectors concerned whether or not this guy would be packing an ankle joint due to the brand new tooling. Well, he may just be packing the best ankle joint that we have so far seen from a Legacy United Deluxe class. But, as I'm sure you guys all know by now, to see what doom and destruction both Bludgeon and Ruckus can cause, now let's put them both through the pose test. Flying through some robot mode size comparisons, make it double and call it trouble, because here is how Bludgeon and Ruckus both stack up against each other, and the biggest takeaway that I do get from this comparison is that this guy is way bigger than I expected him to be. Next up, it's Bludgeon versus Bludgeon, because on the left we have the brand new Amazon exclusive, and on the right the original Legacy Evolution mainline release. Now to my surprise, the exclusive actually has more changes made to him in comparison to this guy. Usually it's completely the other way round, which does kind of make me wonder as to why originally they even bothered with this original version if they had planned from the get-go to give us this, which I definitely do think reigns supreme between the both. And then finally, for a general size comparison, we are bringing out the Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime. Firing through a few comparisons here for Ruckus, we are starting off with easily the most important out of the bunch, the Legacy Evolution Beachcomber, which to my surprise, and I'm sure to you guys too, is in fact the original mold that this guy here is based on. This just goes to show that when Hasbro wants to bring out a banging retool, they absolutely can. This guy is not only almost completely brand new, but is also significantly bigger in comparison to what was originally a mini-bot. And there is so much fan service going down when it does come here to this Ruckus, because he now finally completes the original 3 trigger cons. So here we have the Transformers Legacy crankcase, as well as Windsweeper, kind of. Honestly guys, I thought the 2-pack that did come with the Prime Universe breakdown was an absolute insult to Transformers Prime fans, so I didn't even bother picking it up. So here we have the next best thing, which is the Legacy Needle Nose, which I do believe, with the exception of the paint deco and the brand new head sculpt, is near enough identical to that Windsweeper. Then finally, rounding things off with a general comparison, we have the Studio Series 86 Bumblebee, and I think it's nuts that in 2024 a deluxe class can either be as small as this guy or as big as this guy. Firing into Bludgeon's transformation, for the first step, take the bicep and spin this inwards. You are then going to take the forearm armor and spin this all the way around to the back. You are then going to take the fist and slide this forwards until eventually the palm is facing towards you. You must then make sure to do all of the same steps for the second side, as we are now going to spin around to this guy's back, where we are going to take these tank turrets, slide these down, until eventually these also do snap into place. You are then going to spin him here to the side, where we are going to take the backpack and detach it away from the treads. You then must make sure to flip this all the way up, until eventually the top is now facing the bottom. You are then going to flip this guy back round to the front, where we are going to take the chest piece and slide this up very slightly. Once that's all said and done, we can then take a hold of the shoulders, and these should be able to extend outwards exactly like that. For the next step, you are then going to spin this guy here to the side, because in order to prevent that chest piece from popping clean off, we are then going to take the tread and angle this here backwards very slightly, exactly like this. We should then be able to spin around here to the back, take a hold of this guy's head sculpt, and begin bringing this here back. Now at the very same time, you can then take a hold of the chest piece and pull this upwards also. Now there is a tiny slot here that eventually this tab is going to slide into. So slide both of these back exactly at the same time until eventually you should be left with something which looks just like this. Once that's all said and done, we can then take a hold of the shoulder and slide this all the way back until eventually it does match up with the second side. You are then going to flip back around to the back of this guy, where we are now going to take the backpack, slide this down, until eventually this too does very nicely snap into place. For this next step, you are then going to take a hold of the front part of the foot and slide this all the way down, and then what you're going to do is make use out of that additional knee joint that I showcased previously. So, detach this away from the transformation joint and extend this here all the way back exactly like that. Again guys, make sure to do the same for the second side, so that we can then directly combine these bad boys down the middle just like this. Now we turn to the fun part, so take a hold of the tread and slide this here all the way down. You are then going to make use out of the elbow joint and bend this backwards. Now this tab is going to slide into the forearm, so to make this happen you then must make use out of this additional hinge joint. So snap that there into place. You are then going to take this panel and extend this here forwards and then proceed to split this tread directly down the middle. This is then going to come all the way down just like that until eventually that tab can slide into that slot, so that once that is all said and done, this guy should be looking exactly like this. Then finally, to finish off this guy's core transformation, you are now going to line all of those tabs up with the slots on the base. So making use out of those knee joints, we are just going to compress this down until eventually everything should very nicely snap into place. Then finally, to truly complete this guy's look, we are now going to bring out the Fusion Cannon, and those tabs should then very nicely slide into the slits on the back to create a pretty banging looking tank. And bang! Here is Bludgeon, fully transformed into his Cybertronian tank mode. Now in comparison to the previous form, there really aren't too many visible changes, with the exception of the colour scheme and the chest piece. Unfortunately, this guy is still unable to roll along the ground, which I really do think kind of sucks for a tank former. It quite simply does drain the enjoyment out of this guy and turns him into pretty much a glorified paperweight. But when it does come down to an overall design, I would be lying if I said this tank didn't look absolutely killer. But to be honest guys, would you believe me if I said that this isn't even as accurate as it can be in comparison to the original IDW look? Because if you do make full use out of the Evo Fusion gimmick, you are able to create an entirely different look, which compared alongside the original configuration, I think is way closer to match his actual design. Turning to this guy's transformation, yet again the G1 vibes are most definitely alive, as this guy transforms I think in around 8 steps. So for the first step, take a hold of the legs and combine these here directly down the middle. You are then going to spin here to the underside, where you will then completely deploy those heel spurs. For the next step, we are then going to take a hold of the head, and this will simply spin around until eventually the back is now facing the front. You are then going to take these bicep tabs and snap these here into the side of the torso. Again, make sure to do the same for the second side. We are then going to flip this guy here upside down, where the elbows are going to snap into these tiny cutouts on the backpack, just like that. Then for the next step, we are now going to open up the back of the legs just like this, and the aim of the game is to slide these trapdoors in between these cutouts. So making use out of the knee joints, we are going to compress all of this down just like that, until eventually we reach to this stage where those tabs must slide into those slots. So make sure to do the same for the second side. Once that's now all said and done, we can then take the roll cage and snap this into this guy's backpack. You are then going to flip him here upside down, grab a hold of those trapdoors and snap these here back into place. And then for one final step to match the transformation of the Legacy Beachcomber, you are then going to bring out that minigun, which totally doubles as the front end of the Dune Buggy. And bang! Here we have Ruckus now fully transformed into his Dune Buggy mode, which again appears to be a fantastic update in comparison to that original G1 toy. So as we check out the details, the inbuilt shocks up front I think are looking sick. As we spin this guy here to the side, I really like how they've tried their best to recreate the look of the original G1 stickers. The only part of the design that I honestly can't say I'm too crazy about would be the visible head issue. Now considering that this guy was originally a Transformers Legacy Beachcomber, it does kind of suck not to see them nick the engineering where that figure's head could slide inside the torso, and there is most definitely enough room for that, so it does kind of baffle me as to why they did just decide to leave this hanging out. But as we flip this guy here to the side, one return which I most definitely am glad to see would be that of not only the pinned on wheels, but some proper rubber tyres, meaning that when it does come down to turbo boosting through that battlefield, this guy should have no issues in doing so. When it does come down to some inbuilt weaponry, the original idea of the OG G1 trigger cons was that their weapons could be triggered at a push of the button. Unfortunately, with this release, they have decided to remove that gimmick, but one thing which I do think is a big improvement is now they are fully blast effect compatible, meaning that when it does come down to tearing up that battlefield, this guy should have no issues in doing so. Firing through some vehicle mode size comparisons, here we have the partners in crime stacked up against each other. So to kind of go back to my earlier point, despite Ruckus only being a deluxe class, he can most definitely hold his own in comparison to a Voyager class. For some bludgeon versus bludgeon action, again we are bringing out the original mainline release on the right. Now to kind of go back to my earlier point, personally I love to make use out of the Evo fusion capability to create an entirely different look. And again guys, this is actually accurate to how this guy did appear in the original IDW comic. Personally, I think this does wonders for the look of the tank, making it a pretty big departure in comparison to the original transformation. For a pretty nutty comparison, here we have the Legacy Beachcomber, and it is crazy to think that this guy originally came from this guy. Not only when it comes down to robot mode, but even here in Dune Buggy mode, they really do appear to be completely different figures. Here is how he stacks up alongside the Transformers Legacy Deluxe Class Crankcase, Needle Nose aka Windsweeper, just to give you guys a sense of scale between the two. Then finally, for a general size comparison, the Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Bumblebee. So, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Legacy United Doom and Destruction 2-pack. Personally, I think this is by far the best out of the bunch so far, especially when it comes down to Ruckus, because when it does come down to a retool standard, this guy blows it out of the water completely. He is pretty damn epic, and I think the same can also be said for Bludgeon. Whilst he is nowhere near as extensive in comparison to Ruckus, he is still a great looking figure, and I do think is an improvement in comparison to the regular mainline version. So if you do like the look of these characters, then I would most definitely recommend to jump on them, especially as of right now, this is the only way in completing the iconic trigger cons. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on this 2-pack down in the comment section below. What do you guys think? I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, transform and roll out!